Those of you who have that tradition in common, by the way, with me, will remember, I hope, Martha Hugh Clough at Say Not the Struggle, Naught Availeth. You remember his Decalogue. It's a very fine piece of mid-Victorian work. Adultery do not commit, advantage rarely comes of it. Thou shalt not kill, but needs not strive officiously to keep alive. So it goes on. There's always a Swiftian thing. Given that it's written by the man who wrote Say Not the Struggle, Naught Availeth, I think it's rather impressive. I mentioned it before I move on to my own rereading and recasting of the Ten Commandments. I want briefly just to say why it is the subject is such a compelling and such an essential one. All the great questions that divide theology from philosophy are finally, I think, reducible to two questions. First, is it true, as is definitively stated in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, that at one time, one God created man or mankind in his own image? Or is it rather the case that many men, at several times and in many places, created many, many gods and continue to create many gods in their own images? As you'll see, a lot more hangs on that than just a very important shift from the singular to the plural. Second question is this: is our sense of right and wrong, our knowledge of right and wrong, if you prefer good and evil, is it proper to ourselves? Is it innate to us? Is it our pride, our property? Or does it come to us as a gift from revelation? Is it part of a covenant with a supernatural authority? So you're pleased to bear in mind as I go on that those two central questions underlie every word of this text and every examination of it. Now, it's not as easy as many people, including Clough, may have thought, to isolate and identify 10 commandments and then just do your own version of the Decalogue. To begin with, the commandments appear 3 times at least in the Old Testament. And they are, in their several and discrepant appearances, they're embedded in great slabs of prose, which also mainly consist of orders, commands, other forms of edict or ukase, often very minutely spelled out and very highly codified and specified. For example, not to get too far ahead of myself, the first iteration of the Ten Commandments in Exodus chapter 20 is almost immediately followed by an obsessively detailed spelling out of the codes governing ox goring, a code which incorporates the famous equivalences of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, depending famously on whose ox is being gored, and which, just as the goring is starting to get boring, perhaps even boring to its almighty author, swerves off very abruptly at a complete tangent and says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," which also has the force of divine law, and all of it has the status of commandment. And all of it was used by Christians as such, and Jews, as a direct mandate until the incineration of the last witch. A process that's still going on in some parts of the world, most notably in Africa. And an event in our history that we have good and sad reason to know is still quite distressingly recent. So it's quite difficult to know where the Decalogue of Commandments leaves off, and the other instructions, ukases and edicts, so to say, kick in. Anyway, the first and the best known version, the one we think we're talking about, or you thought we were going to be talking about till you got here, appears in Exodus chapter 20. There's then a sulphurous interlude in which Moses, or after which Moses, smashes the original tablets, smashes the tablets inscribed by the finger of God. After that, there's a reprise of the commandments in Exodus 34. But by no means an identical one. And then after many wanderings and many sufferings on the part of Moses and his followers, the entire business, the whole Decalogue, is again redone and restated in Deuteronomy chapter 5. A lot of people are surprised to hear this. They shouldn't be. Pentateuch, or the Torah, has within its 5 books 2 different accounts of the creation story, 2 separate genealogies of the seed of Adam, and 2 completely discrepant stories of Noah's flood. Bear this in mind because we're coming back to it. So, without forgetting these impending revisions that are coming to us, let's take the original version of the commandments anyway, in their due order, and see where they lead us. And the first thing you'll notice is that the business takes 16 verses, not 10. And the first injunction has very little to do with morality, if anything, and a lot to do with the amour propre of the lawgiver himself. And nor is it self-evident that the various declensions of this throat clearing of the first commandment are the same. No graven images are to be made of any living thing on heaven or earth or in the water. Is that one commandment? Possibly. No prostrations are to be made. If the next generation of children didn't keep the commandments, they'd still be protected by the fact that their parents had kept the commandments. But no. See where I'm going with that. All of this suggesting a great insecurity and unease. Then comes the requirement, again tediously repeated, for the observance of the Sabbath day. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son. I may as well finish this. Nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. Uncontroversial in itself, a day off, but again, having nothing to do in this case with ethics or morality, but only with the fear of the Lord. It is only obedience to that fear that is moral. And it's interesting as marking, not for the